for that. Welcome to Health Australia Party. I'm Molly. Tonight we're welcoming Dr. Julie McCredden. Julie has a PhD in cognitive science and cognitive psychology, and she has a master's in counselling. So she wears a lot of hats. Julie, welcome to tonight's talk. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very honoured to be here, Molly. Thank you.
Tell me, Julie, how did you get from teaching university students and other students how to use technology? How did you get to this side of it where you looked at all the health effects of 5G and the electromagnetic fields?
Well, after my PhD, which was actually modelling the brain using artificial neural networks, I went to work in the real world for a while and came back to university. And I came back to university working in an applied area, which was in education, trying to help lecturers to help the students to grasp difficult concepts. In particular, we thought at the time that use of technology would help facilitate this. I was part of the wave really when, first of all, we started getting lecturers to record all their lectures on Blackboard so students could replay them. But then along came the iPad and we got all very excited about what we could do with that. And we thought at the time that, I thought at the time along with other educational designers, that we could use technology to help engage students and to help them to process information more deeply. Well, that was the hype, and for a while I rode on that wave and believed it was possible. But after a while, it became clear to me that it wasn't making the young people smarter. And in fact, what I was seeing was this cut and paste mentality and an inability to build complex thoughts and to think in a linear, sequential, logical way, but rather this kind of series of distracted thoughts from all different areas. And I thought, this isn't making our kids smarter. And I started to question what I was doing. But we were being wined and dined at the time by Apple in particular, who was donating lots of equipment and iPads to universities and schools. They'd been doing that in primary and high schools for decades. And so same with Google and Microsoft, and running their own conferences, education conferences, making it appear like they were education conferences, but they were actually promotional conferences. Anyway, so I started to become concerned about the effects of this technology, and I started looking into it. And I spoke with Victor Leach, who is an ex-retired radiation officer now. At the time, he was still working at the university, and he told me about how the precautionary principle wasn't being adopted. And he'd worked in ionising radiation for decades, and they used a precautionary principle quite stringently there to keep the public safe, but it just wasn't being used with this non-ionising radiation. And in fact, yes, it was really just open slather. Anyway, so I started looking into it. I didn't believe him at first because I was in love with my iPad. I was carrying it around everywhere, and I was trying to get lecturers to use iPads for studio learning where students could walk around and look at each other's artefacts and mark them. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I looked into the science and I went into shock and started to see that there was really some serious harm being has been found and being suggested. And so consequently, Victor and I and another person, Steve Weller, who used to be in an organisation called Stop Smart Meters in Victoria, but he has a degree in microbiology. We decided to form ORSAA because we thought the most important thing is to gather the science to actually prove, to ourselves and to the public, is there actually something to this? Because the debate was raging. Debate's always been going on in the background in the public. And I went into shock partly because I was promoting this technology and I had lecturers under me who were trusting what I was telling them and thousands of students under them. And when I found out that there was harm, I couldn't believe that our authorities wouldn't be telling us the truth, and moreover, that they would be covering it up. And
yes, very hard to believe, isn't it?
It's very, very hard to believe. And when you go into it, you find out that this goes as high as the World Health Organization, and the compromising of the science, and partly because the science is so complex, it's very easy to pull the wool over people's eyes. So that, in fact, I have heard people from Telstra and from government say, oh, the general public won't be able to understand this. And they're almost banking on the fact that people can't. And so I don't believe people can't. I think people are logical, and it is possible to explain most scientific concepts in everyday language. And that's my intention now, to try and help educate people so that they have an awareness and can then make an informed choice about what they do with their family and their children, and whether or not they get involved in this politically. And I'm so grateful to be here talking to the Health Australia Party, because I understand that there are people who do see that health is number one before everything else. If we don't have that, we don't have a functional society or a functional planet.
Yes, so, exactly. Yes. Yeah, so, I love my iPad and I love my phone because I feel safe when I go out at night and I've got a phone with me. I guess for me, I just need to know how to use it safely. That's the big thing. So tell me how Wi-Fi and mobile technologies actually work, because although I understand the frequencies a little bit, I really don't get how they do work.
Okay. Well, so what I'll do is I'll begin my talk by sharing my screen, and I've got slides to help me answer these questions as we go. So
lovely. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So, okay. There we go. So the first slide there, and I'll just minimize myself on this screen, or I might minimize this all. Is that okay with you, Molly? I just
Thank you, Julie, sorry.
I've just minimized us all so you can see the whole screen without our photo.
Yep,
That's okay,
great.
yeah.
That's great.
So I usually start my talk with explaining the natural global electromagnetic circuit that we all live in. Most people don't realise that we are completely surrounded by moving charges through us and around us. What's actually happening all the time as we live and breathe is that from the sun is coming electromagnetic radiation in all different frequencies. And it comes down to the earth and it wraps around the earth, first of all making the plasma, making the magnetosphere, and then the X-rays and ultraviolet rays being trapped up in the upper atmosphere, and the electrons being stripped, and those stripping the electrons off the particles up there and creating a shield around the earth called the ionosphere. And that wraps all the way around the earth. And then inside of that, in the lower atmosphere, we have some cosmic rays coming through from the sun, and we have radiation coming from the soil and the rocks. And all of those rays create the movement of particles. The most important force that creates the movement of particles, of course, is lightning. Now, what happens is, see, the earth is actually negatively charged and the sky is positively charged. And when we walk on the earth, our feet are negatively charged and our head is positively charged. And there's about 150 volts between our head and our feet, depending on how tall we are. Trees bring up the negative charge from the earth up through their branches, up into their leaves, and they attract the positively charged clouds to bring the rain. And that's why when we cut down the trees in the forests, we don't get rain, because we don't have the trees attracting the clouds. And then there's the lightning discharging this, so there's this, you can see there's this flow going round and round, and the lightning discharges the positive down to the negative, and it's actually striking the earth. It's hard to believe this, but it's actually striking the earth at 100 beats per second somewhere on the earth. And what it, yeah, and what it's doing, it was every second somewhere in the earth, there's about 100 lightning strikes somewhere around the earth. And what actually happens is it sets up this pulse that goes around the earth inside inside the lower atmosphere. It's pulsing, and it's actually pulsing at around 8 cycles per second, 8 beats per second, which is also called 8 hertz. And that is the same frequency as the alpha waves in our brain. This frequency, it's called the Schumann resonance. It has 8, and then it has some other higher frequencies as well that all seem to correspond with brain frequencies. The Schumann resonance is actually essential for life, and this constant flow of charges is essential for life. When the Schumann resonance also is important for the replication of DNA, and it sets our sleep-wake cycle. And these charges that are moving through our bodies are creating electrical currents that are gently moving through our bodies, are essential for all of the biological and electrochemical processes going on through our body. If we muck around with the global electromagnetic circuit, we are mucking around with this beautifully balanced, delicately balanced system. And so we are mucking around with it.
Yes, we are, aren't we?
So yes, we are. So what we're actually doing is man-made electromagnetic fields are actually surrounding us now. And on the left-hand side, this is actually an artist's impression of what it would look like if we could see the man-made electromagnetic fields that we're surrounding ourselves by. If you take a 1 and put 18 zeros after it, that's how much stronger the man-made electromagnetic radiation is compared to the natural background radiation. It's huge.
Heavens, that's massive.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of concern because birds and bees use the magnetic field of the earth to navigate, and we're actually blinding them by blanketing it with this man-made system. And on the right-hand side, I have my non-artist impression of what it's like for a child sitting in school. So here we have perhaps the cordless phone in the corner, which is putting out on the teacher's desk, which is putting out a square wave, which affects the heart. We have their mobile phone in their pocket connected to the local towers over here and masts. We have the signals from those masts beaming into the school, and often you find masts and towers right next to schools. The mesh on the ceiling that's sending the broadband signals down to their laptop, and they're being exposed to this 5 hours a day at school and several hours more at home. Oh, and as well as that, there's the satellites, which are damaging the ionosphere, sending signals down to the GPS and to fix satellite if you're living in the country. So the question is this affecting the kids? Okay, so I'm just going to explain very briefly because the next question is, next question is, what is electromagnetic radiation? Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
What is
because
electromagnetic?
It's so complex. I've looked at it so often and it's just like, well, okay, it's double Dutch to me.
Well, yes, I mean, and that's partly why it's so hard to come to terms with it, but hopefully the pictures will help. So if we understand that at the center of the sun, there's these radioactive emitting processes going on, nuclear processes where energy is being released. And energy gets released in forms of photons or waves, depending on which way you look at them, it's both. But anyway, let's just say that they're waves and they're coming from the sun in all different wavelengths. This is a long wavelength and these are short wavelengths. And long wavelengths have low frequency Frequency is how fast it goes up and down. So a long wavelength goes up slowly and down slowly. So that's got a low frequency. And short wavelengths go up and down very fast, and so they have high frequencies. The lowest, so most of the energy that's coming from the sun is actually coming, the electromagnetic energy is coming in the visible light spectrum, which is wonderful because that's important for life on Earth. We're getting all that beautiful visible light and all of the different colours of the rainbow. And then we get a fair bit of ultraviolet and X-rays, but we don't get very much. We get a little bit of infrared, but we don't get very many microwave frequencies, and we get radio waves as well. But this end of the spectrum, we don't get very much of it all, only a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. The waves that we mostly get are up here, because then the ionosphere protects us from everything else. But down here, this is where the man-made frequencies are being placed in the non-natural spectrum. And the lowest frequency, or the longest wavelength waves, are the radio waves. They can be hundreds of kilometers long. The long ones actually travel further because they're slow. They actually penetrate and they just carry further through the atmosphere. The short ones don't travel very far at all. But so here we've got radio waves, and then as the wavelength gets shorter and the frequency gets faster, then these are about the length of the height of skyscrapers. These radio frequencies, which are the microwave radio frequencies used for 3G and 4G, they are about the length of human limbs and the size of human heads, which is unfortunate because that means that they're maximally absorbed by those things. And then as we get to shorter wavelengths, which is they're centimeters long and then even millimeters long, that's when we're getting into the 5G spectrum, and they're at the size of fingernails or the length of insects. So that's the spectrum. Now you might often hear that, oh, these frequencies can't hurt you because they're non-ionizing. Yeah. You hear, oh, only ionizing rays can harm you. Now that's not true. It is true that non-ionizing rays do cause DNA damage and they do cause cancer. But just because these aren't ionizing, it doesn't mean that they can't cause harm. Right. Now, what does it mean to be ionizing? Well, these rays here, they're the ones that will strip an electron off an atom. You can bombard something with X-rays and gamma rays and they will strip an electron. But it's kind of like a one-to-one reaction. You're talking about one particle being dislodged or one component being dislodged. These don't do the stripping, but what they do is they create a force field that still moves charged particles. And I'll show you that in the next slide. Every electromagnetic wave has two components. It has an electrical component and a magnetic component. And in radiation, these two things work together. They're in sync and they're proportional to one another. Now, it's mostly the electric field that we talk about, and it goes positive, negative, positive, negative. Why is it called a field? It's called a field because everything's lining up. Everything's going up in the same direction and then down in the same direction, up in the same direction. That's how the force is moving everything in these parallel. They're described by parallel vectors, and that's why they're called a field. Okay. So how does a microwave work? Well, this is how it actually works. Because of this positive, negative movement of the electric field, it's actually moving water. Water's slightly negatively charged more towards the oxygen side, and the hydrogens on the other side are slightly more positively charged. And so what happens is when the field is going up and down and up and down, it's actually moving oxygen up and down and up and down. So this makes the water molecule vibrate, which heats your food. So that's how microwaves work. So it's actually not about stripping electrons anymore, but it's about moving charged particles inside molecules. And more than that, when molecules are inside structures like water, this is water here with a whole lot of oxygens and H2Os, hydrogens and oxygens. You can see these hydrogens here attract this oxygen here. This oxygen here attracts these hydrogens here. When you start mucking around, that's this, and that creates the structure of water. When you start mucking around with how these, you start moving these around, then you're actually changing the structure of water. And this becomes even more important when you're looking at compounds making up complex molecules in our system such as proteins, because protein folding is dependent on where the positives sit and where the negatives sit, and that's what makes proteins stick together.
Okay.
So one of the things that microwave radiation is known to do, and in particular 5G frequencies, is to unfold proteins, and that's not good.
So
I
what does
ask
that
you as a
mean?
practitioner, would you say is that good, Molly?
I would think that's not good, definitely. So what would to someone?
Pardon?
Sorry, did we just get disrupted there?
Yes, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. So given that the human body is mostly water, that to me, without the knowledge that you have, I would have to say that that's got to be quite destructive to the human body.
Yes.
To be in these fields.
Yes. So you can see, because what we're doing is we're actually mucking around with the building blocks of what makes our tissue and muscles and all of the processes in our body work. It's not that we're particularly giving anyone any particular disease. What we're doing is mucking around with the bricks and the mortar.
Yeah, the mortar.
And which is, the proteins in the water. So in that way, this is where we actually need a paradigm shift in health, because traditionally medicine is concerned with biology and chemistry. They think about cells and they think about chemical reactions. They do know, medicine does know, that all the chemical reactions are based on charges and sharing of charges and needing to fill valence shells of atoms and molecules. But they don't think about that very much. It's mostly biology and chemistry. And on the other hand, we have the physicists and the engineers who are creating the electrical grid and the mobile phone technology systems, and they don't know anything about biology and chemistry. In fact, for a lot of them, it makes them squirm, and that's why they went off and did physics at school. And the problem is, and they're not bad people, they're just ignorant. And so what we actually need to understand what's happening right now on planet Earth is we actually need to understand how those three systems interact. Nature doesn't say, oh, I only care about biology, I don't care about physics, therefore electromagnetic fields are not going to harm me because I'm not physics, I'm biology. Nature is not like that. Nature is holistic. We have these tiny little electric currents going through us, turning into chemical reactions, and it's happening interchangeably all the time. Neurons in the brain have electrical impulses going to neurotransmitters. Our heart is electrically active, but if you muck around with the chemistry in the heart, you will muck around with the electrical activity. Most biological reactions in the biochemical reactions in the body are due to rearrangement of charged particles. For example, there's the electron transport chain in the membrane of mitochondria, which creates a proton gradient, which is important for ATP, for energy. So everyone knows that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So if you start mucking around with what the electron transport chain is doing, which is known that 5G will do as well, then you're going to be affecting the production of energy and the uptake of oxygen. So it is a paradigm shift, and people in biology and chemistry will need to come to terms with physics, and people in physics will need to come to terms with biology and chemistry if we are to survive on this planet.
Yeah, it's I guess it's like in medicine they have all the specialties, so the heart specialist or the rheumatologist and so on, and they don't necessarily look at all the bits together.
No, they don't.
So you don't get an overall view. And so it's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And it was only really in the 70s when people started to understand that, you know, living near high voltage power lines was affecting the body. And because children who were living near high voltage wires or who had transformers near their house, on poles near their homes, they were more likely to have leukemia. These are low frequency electromagnetic fields, but it really started there, this understanding that they are affecting us. And the science has been growing, but it's still not taught in medical school. And that's unfortunate because there's so much of it around that doctors need to know. And partly, and alternative medicine practitioners also need to know. So, yeah, so here we are.
Yeah, that's right. It's certainly not well looked at all, and not well understood. And I guess there's probably reasons by companies that have something to gain by perhaps keeping information separated, I guess.
Yes, I have watched a YouTube video clip written by a woman who used to work at Harvard, and she was actually asked on 2 occasions to write about the effects of electromagnetic fields on health for a medical textbook, for 2 different medical textbooks. And on both occasions, just as she had finished writing first the chapter or the couple of paragraphs for the book, it was pulled for no reason.
Gosh.
Yes, so that's why doctors haven't heard of it, because it's actually been taken out of. And in one case, it was the whole chapter was pulled. In the other case, I think she ended up getting 1 or 2 sentences, and that was all. So,
see, I don't know. It just makes me very sad that these things happen. So, yes. Julie, you said with the power lines, which is obviously affecting children more. Is it the same with 3G, 4G, 5G? I would expect that children are more susceptible.
Well, it hasn't been well researched, but I'll show you what we know so far. And so, first of all, last year out came the Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is an insurance company in the US, their annual report. And it showed that the health of young people in the US is now starting to decline at age 27. That's
27.
27. That's when it's starting to take a dive. We would be expecting them to say 57, around my age, but no, it's actually 27. And what they showed, that they actually looked at the health of Gen Xers and millennials, and they found that the millennials were significantly more unhealthy, and that we're only talking, you know, a time period of 4 years. They're talking about that within the last 3 years, there's been a 15 to 30% increase in major depression, type 2 diabetes, hyperactivity, cardiovascular conditions, digestive conditions, and 20% more for women with depression, diabetes, and other endocrine issues. Now, what has happened in the last 3 to 4 years? Has lifestyle changed that much? Has smoking changed that much? Has the amount of chemical toxins that people are surrounded by changed that much? All of these things have changed slightly, but the one thing that has changed drastically in that time is the ubiquitous uptake from 2013 to 2017 of Wi-Fi technologies and smart devices by young people in schools and work, universities. It's an elephant in the room. Similarly, when we look at the cancer map of the world, people probably don't know this because it's not publicised, that Australia has the world's highest cancer rate and New Zealand the second highest. And a Victorian report that came out last year showed that brain cancer is now more prevalent in children less than 15, and it's the biggest causer of cancer death in children. It's overtaken leukemia. The causal factors for what's causing this cancer in Australia are obviously not being well managed, and radio frequency electromagnetic fields, which is all the microwave technologies that I'm talking about for telecommunications. That's one of the factors. And so, as I said, it's an elephant in the room and it needs to be discussed, and that's why we're here.
Certainly does. And you hardly see a teenager or younger without a mobile phone on them,
Yes,
do you?
this
Everywhere.
is the typical image that you see. And see, when we were young, I say, well, back in the days when we were young, my parents said, sit 6 yards. It wasn't meters then. You had to sit 6 yards back from the television, something like that.
That's right.
And
yes.
because they knew that there were electromagnetic fields coming from the TV. So now what we're doing is we're putting almost like putting a television in our pockets and walking around with it all day. People have forgotten. So I'll just cover the research now. And my particular area of interest is the brain and the emotions. So there's a whole lot of different health effects that could be discussed here. I'm not going to discuss cancer anymore. It's a whole issue on its own. And often the focus is on that. But there are all these other health effects that are going on that need to be brought to people's attention. So I'm going to cover mostly the brain. Starting with, okay, so what's the evidence? So military research was done in the 1970s. Now, you need to believe military research because they don't muck around. Even back then, a couple of thousand papers looking at the effects of microwave radiation. Results showing neurological pathologies resulting from breaching of the blood-brain barrier. Headache, fatigue, irritability, agitation, tension, drowsiness, sleeplessness, anxiety, forgetfulness, lack of concentration, and the ability to control externally via sound effects. Then we have the Bioinitiative report in 2007 and then again in 2012, which is a collection of papers and a report compiled by a group of independent scientists. When we say independent scientists, we mean scientists that are not affiliated with industry in any way. A couple of dozen of them from around the world have gotten together and created this report with its own update in 2012. And these are the main sections of the report showing children are more vulnerable, effects on autism, electrohypersensitivity. Oh, sorry, I'm going to just disconnect that. I should have done that beforehand. Effects on the blood-brain barrier, brain tumours, nervous system, Alzheimer's disease, and synchronized neural activity. So all of these effects have been known and they're documented. I recommend, if you want to start reading, go into that report and read, even if you just read the executive summary and look at the tables in the back showing all of the effects classified into these categories and where they occur. It's very, very well written, very easy to read. So then along we came ORSAA, and we've actually compiled a database, our own database of papers and classified them. So we're a group of scientists, researchers and clinicians. It's a not-for-profit organisation, but it's a recognised scientific association, and we've been looking into the health and biological effects of wireless radiation, and we want to know, are there effects, and if there are, we need to tell people about them. But where are the effects? So with the database, we don't just put them all in one big blob, they're actually classified. So in there we've got the in vivo papers, the in vitro papers. So in vivo means live animals or live humans, live plants. In vitro is in test tubes, and epidemiology is when you do counts of people living around a tower to look at their effects. And we have all of the papers that we've been able to find from the year 2012, and then we've worked backwards to the beginning of this century. We've also got the collection of Henry Lai, who's a famous researcher. He sent us his whole collection, and we have all of our PANZA's papers in here. And our PANZA is the Australian Radiation Protection body that is advises the government on the standards, and we've taken all their papers and looked at them too. So if you can see here, when you look, this to me, this table is the proof, because these are all the papers showing effects. When out of a search of 2003 papers, when we look for those papers that show effects. So 52 papers showing brain tumours, 6 papers breast cancer, 220 biochemical changes, 38 fatigue, immune system 65, oxidative stress, this is the biggest one, 256 papers. If you know oxidative stress, Molly, which you probably do, oxidative stress underlies many, many conditions, cardio conditions and autoimmune conditions such as diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, depression, many, many different conditions are affected by oxidative stress. And it's the biggest effect that we're seeing, except for altered enzyme activity over here. But this is a huge effect. And when we looked at our Panzer, they didn't classify oxidative stress. It was like they had a blind spot for it. But you can see 157 papers showing DNA damage, mutagenic and genotoxic effects. Okay, so
and
of course,
they're the neurobehavioral effect as well.
Yes, so they're the ones I'm interested in, the neurobehavioral cognitive effects, 194 papers. So you can see this is quite serious.
Extremely.
And you can go to our database here, there, www, there's ORSAA, there's the website. You can go there, our database is free. You can go there and do searches in the database for anything that you're interested in. And you can download the papers in a list of papers in CSV form. You'll get you'll get a whole lot of different bits of information. You'll get the abstract, the URL, the authors, whether it's industry funded or not, a whole lot of information about the paper.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah. So if you just look at the main effects, if I just list them out simply, these are all effects of non-ionizing, which is, microwave radiation. And it's also low frequency as well. So once again, the ones that I'm interested in are oxidative stress, neurodegeneration, changes in neurotransmitters, blood-brain barrier, cognitive function, and developmental impacts. But as you can see, there are other very serious things on mitochondria and DNA damage and damage to sperm that you can see are kind of very important to the propagation of the species.
Yes.
So if I go into the ORSAA database and I just put in as a search term, for example, these terms, these are the papers that I get out under each term, and orange show the effects and blue show the papers that show no effects. So if I type in cognitive, I get about 90 papers that are showing effects, and about, let's see, 20, 40, about 45 papers that are showing no effects. Depression, most of the papers show effects. Neurotransmitter alterations, they all show effects. Anxiety, most of the papers show effects. Memory and hippocampus. Interestingly, anxiety is the biggest issue in schools today. It's overtaken other issues like autism, developmental problems, and refugees. It's now kind of the number one issue that teachers and principals are having to deal with.
Is that age related, Julie? Is it more primary or high school kids that are affected, or uni?
It's both. I'll show you some of the papers later on. In particular, I'll go into some detail of the papers that have been looked at with anxiety, but it's both, and even young children. And if we go and look for papers on children and adolescents, there's 81 papers. 22 of them show effects of radiofrequency, microwave radiation. 9 show no effects, and 15 show uncertain effects, which means we can't tell one way or the other. We need more research. You can see there's not a lot of papers on this. The effects on children and adolescents hasn't been studied well, and there haven't been any studies on the long-term biological effects. And that's so surprising, given that this technology is being propagated and rolled out left, right and centre, surrounding children night and day from the cradle to the grave, and the studies have not been done.
Well, it's quite staggering that the studies aren't being done. And I guess from a business perspective, if the studies were done, it may put a damper on rolling out all this technology.
Exactly. In fact, when we go into the database and look at the papers that have been back here, I'll show you. When we look at all papers together, we did a study a couple of years ago. Out of almost 2,000 papers, 67% of them showed effects. But then when we looked at who was funding the papers that are funded by industry are more likely to show no effects. The papers funded by independent institutions and government bodies are more likely to show effects. And it's a very, very significant difference you can see between those two groups. So if you look at the details of the paper, and I'm not going to go in one by one and look and describe every paper and what they did, but here you can see the numbers of people in the study. And these are children. All of these are effects on children. And what was found. So 2,042 in Taiwan, headache and migraine. 781 in China, fatigue with mobile phone usage. In New Zealand, 370, increased risk of headaches, feeling down, waking in the night, sleepiness at school, and tinnitus. 94,000, almost 95,000 people in Japan after lights out if they're using their mobile phone, shorter sleep duration, poor sleep, sleep during the day, and insomnia.
Heavens.
About 1,500 children in Bavaria. Exposure to these frequencies and conduct problems for both adolescents and children. 28,700. This is the Danish National Birth Cohort. They looked at mothers who were exposed while they were pregnant and then afterwards. And when they were using cell phones in both time periods, there were more behavioural difficulties. That is hyperactivity in attention, emotional symptoms, peer problems, conduct problems, and pro-social behaviour problems. This is a study with
number.
That's huge. This is a study with mice showing, it doesn't mean they were all affected, it just means that effect was significant.
Yes.
And this study with mice actually showed that they had changes very, very similar to ADHD. And this was a follow-up study looking at that with boys, and they found that boys who lived near radio frequency transmitters, they actually had reduced verbal expression, and they had a more likely to have obsessive compulsive and post-traumatic stress disorder than controls. That's 123 boys in Spain in 2016.
Between 9 and 11, gee.
Yeah, that's all. Here we go, and I won't go into the numbers. You can see the numbers down there. Reaction time, attention, focused attention, memory, perception, neuromuscular and cognitive function. That's perception in light and sound, recognition, attention, semantic memory, that's understanding of the meaning of words, increased fatigue, and all psychosociological indicators were affected by safe use of devices. So it made a difference whether they had safe use or not of the devices. Memory effects, more memory effects. This is figural memory, which is spatial memory, and EEG, so that's brain waves and memory tasks, showing that there's a 4 to 8 hertz. I was saying 8 hertz before, that's your alpha waves.
Yes.
And EEG frequencies during processing of auditory memory and memory search tasks. So I want to show you in particular one study that was actually done. It was a very, very clean study because you can't sign up children to an experiment to expose them to radio frequency radiation, right? It's not ethical. Though you can put a tower next to their school and no one has to ask any questions. So there is a global experiment going on with no ethical clearance, but you can't do it in the lab. But this study was actually happened just serendipitously because there were all these ICBM missile stations, detection stations in the Eastern European countries. This is between 1971 and the late 1980s, 1990s. These school children were exposed because, see here, these were the ICBM radar, pulsed radar, was being sent out to detect whether missiles were incoming. And on the slope here, there were children living in the homes here, and then there were children living behind the radar. And so it was possible to compare effects on these children with effects on these children. And they also had another group of children living in a town nearby. Now, this is a very clean neighbourhood. There weren't chemical toxins. It was very rural. Everything was just clean and pristine and simple. So really the only effects that were happening on the children was this pulse radar. First of all, when they looked at it, they found that actually when you looked at the children who were living on that hillside, there were 25% less grade 9 boys alive in that exposed areas. And as an aside, they also affects on pine trees and cows in this area. And this radar was pulsed, and it had a phased array type of structure, which is like 5G, though it had a lower frequency than what 5G is. And these were the results of the study. I won't go into it in detail, but you can see the graphs between. These are the exposed and these are the unexposed. This is their reaction time, how long it takes to react to something. Females, males. So you can see the females who were exposed were taking longer to react to the stimuli than the females who were not exposed. Same for the males. And overall, the exposed group, slower, because their reaction time was greater. It meant they were slower at reacting.
Yes.
This one is their tapping. So they've just asked to tap left, right, left, right, left, right, like this. How able were they to continue that and do it accurately? Well, this is the age group along here, okay? And once again, this is their rate, how fast they could go. So these are the non-exposed and these are the exposed children. This is such clean data. You don't get data so clean in experiments that there's no overlap. It's just consistently lower.
Yeah, yeah. Quite significant, really.
It's very, and this is their capacity of their working memory. That's the memory you use for thinking, problem solving, planning, decision making. So this is how many, how much complexity they could do in their thinking. Exposed children, you can see right down here, really, really low capacity compared to, these are the ones in front of the radar, these are the ones behind the radar but still living in town. These are the ones living in the town nearby, not exposed at all.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yes, this is really, really quite concerning. If we don't have working memory, we don't have adult thinkers and problem solvers for the problems of the world that we will be facing in the future.
Gosh.
So needless to say, I'll just go back here. When this was dismantled, when, the Eastern Bloc countries dismantled all the ICBMs, the Latvian government got in an American corporation to come and blow the radar up, the towers up, and all the people went out in the streets and clinked their champagne glasses and celebrated.
I bet they did.
Not surprisingly. So my concern is the hippocampus in particular, because that's the part of the brain, that little blue place there. It's called hippocampus because it's supposed to be shaped like a seahorse. And it's really important for short-term to long-term memory transfer. So that's laying down of memories. What I'm telling you now, your hippocampus will be tonight actively storing that into your long-term memory in other parts of your brain. If you go to sleep, if you don't go to sleep, it won't do its job. It's also really important for spatial memory, and spatial memory is what we use for navigation, but it's also, spatial memory is also used to tag memories, because part of memory is remembering where you were when something happened. And that's a really important aid in retrieving the memory later on. And if spatial memory goes, then we have problems with navigation and we have problems with memory retrieval. And the hippocampus is also where new cells are being generated. And so if you get damage to the hippocampus, we know that that's implicated with Alzheimer's, depression, bipolar disorder, and the ability to create memories. So here we have a couple, I'm going to show you a couple of studies with rats where they're looking at the hippocampus. And what they do is, these are called water maze studies. So they drop a rat into a tank of water, and the rat has to find a platform, because when it gets to the platform, it can get out. Rats don't like swimming around in water. They try and get out. And it learns, using its spatial memory in its brain, it learns how to get to that platform. And that's what a healthy rat does. But if you expose the rats to 900 megahertz, which is the frequency that's being used all the time for communications, the control ones who weren't exposed showed no effects. After 14 days of exposure, no effects, but after 28 days of exposure, their spatial memory was impaired. The authors said what they saw was blood-brain barrier damage in the hippocampus and in the cortex. And they also said that oxidative stress was probably a huge factor in this. And here's another rat study where I've particularly chosen this because it's got pictures of the mitochondria. Once again, the rats were being trained in the water maze, and they were exposed 6 minutes a day for either 2.5 days, 5 days, to either 2.5, 5 or 10 megawatts per centimetre squared from 1 day up to 1 month. And so they looked at the strength of exposure, and they looked at different lengths of exposure. And they found for the rats who had longer exposures or higher exposures, they were unable to find the submerged platform. And the hippocampus cells were damaged, reduced in numbers, the vesicles were congested and hemorrhaged, and the mitochondria were swollen and disordered. So there's a nice healthy mitochondria, and there's a swollen and damaged mitochondria. The authors said there were alterations in the structure and function of the hippocampus. There were altered levels of neurotransmitters in the hippocampus, and this disrupted learning and memory ability. And so if we go to an overview paper done by the military research in 2015, and once again, as I said, the military don't muck around. They're partly trying to look at microwaves to see what damage they can do to people. So they actually, or what damage can be done to their people. So they look in great detail, and they study people, they study facial expressions and eye dilation, heart rate, everything in great detail in animals and humans. This was what this review paper says: as the fourth largest source of pollution after air, water and noise, the fourth largest, microwave radiation induces many biological effects. The brain is the most sensitive target organ, and here mitochondrial injury occurs earlier and more severely than in other organs. So if you don't believe anything else, believe the military. If you don't know which scientist to believe, should I believe Dr. Julie McCredden from ORSAA? Should I believe our Panzer scientist? Should I believe Professor Rodney Croft when he's on the television saying there's no harm? You might be confused, but all I can say is believe the military. They don't muck around, and this is what they're saying. And for those who care about the pollution of the planet, they're actually saying it's the fourth largest source of pollution after air, water and noise.
Good heavens, yeah.
It's quite serious.
It's very serious, and it's more serious because nothing's being said about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Nothing's being done.
That's right. It's a silent stealth attack. When I say attack, I mean it might be conscious or unconscious, but it's really a source of continual damage to everything that produces life on the planet. So people ask about, will a local base station harm me, the tower that they're putting up the street? So this was a study done in Bavaria in 2011, and the people in that town were actually concerned about the tower. And so because of that, they decided to have tests before the tower went up, and then afterwards they had urine tests and blood tests, and they looked at their hormones and their neurotransmitters. Now, half of the participants in this study were children, Okay, so there was a tower installed in 2004. And of course, different people were being exposed to different amounts depending on where they lived, because if your house is directly in line of sight of the tower, you're going to get more exposure than someone down below in a gully or someone behind other houses. But anyway, so they looked at the people. So the more exposure, this is what they found. This is before, and then this is 6 months after, a year after, and a year and a half later after the tower went up. And this here is the level of neurotransmitters. Now what happened, this is a typical graph. So the stress hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline, they grew significantly. Dopamine levels decreased. Phenylethylamine decreased. And there were problems with sleep, vertigo, concentration and allergies. And overall, the authors concluded that these people were showing the beginning stages of chronic exhaustion and stress. Now, the interesting thing is here, you could actually say, oh, the stress hormones increased because the people were worried. You know, they actually just worked themselves up into a fervor, and that's why their stress hormones increased. And that could be true. It could just be, in that case, psychosomatic effects on your own hormones.
Sure.
However, the phenylethylamine, the PEA neurotransmitter, it's not really mostly a neurotransmitter. It's actually a regulator of other neurotransmitters. It regulates histamine and serotonin, for example. Those levels dropped, but they're not under conscious control. And this was greater for overweight participants. So there's effects that were happening here that weren't under conscious control. And they weren't restored.
Interesting. Julie, back in 2004, we wouldn't have had the frequencies then that they now have coming out from these towers either.
No, these would have been 3G frequencies. Yeah. So even then, so it's not, and now we have 4G and now we have 5G being added to it. So I've just got a list there if anyone's interested of all the different neurotransmitters changes that have been shown by radiofrequency. These are the neurotransmitters that are affected, and these are the effects they cause. And you can see a lot of the conditions that we're seeing today in children and in adults are related to these neurotransmitter changes. Interestingly, a lot of people think they've got tinnitus, this ringing in the ears, but it could actually be due to the frequencies. One way you can tell is that frequencies don't travel well in water. So if you go underwater and your tinnitus stops, it's not tinnitus, it's actually radio frequency.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So, Julie, we had a question coming in from Margaret Murnong, and she said, is there a test we can do to record our baseline blood health and do ongoing monitoring? So you could test some of these neurotransmitters?
Yes, you can test neurotransmitters, and there are other tests as well you can do now. There's tests for oxidative stress. There's the doctor who does most of these tests at the moment, Dr. Russell Cooper in Tasmania. He has now created a kind of set of tests which are biomarkers for the effects of electromagnetic fields, but also the effects of chemical toxins on various functions and various systems. There's a paper by a doctor, a medical researcher, Bell Pom, who actually found that a set of biomarkers, reliable biomarkers for multiple chemical sensitivity and electro-hypersensitivity, so they can be used. In particular, the oxidative stress test I recommend, because as you can see, oxidative stress is one of the biggest biomarkers, one of the biggest effects. Yes. So, so they're available, and yes, you can get in touch with Dr. Russell Cooper, but you can also have a look at Bell Pom's paper, which will show you all of those. And they're slowly being developed. People also do live blood analysis, to see whether or not there's any effects. I myself, because I'm have a scientific brain, I went in and did my own test with a naturopath who does live blood analysis, and we had a Sunday morning, completely not exposed, went straight there with first blood test, a little bit of oxidative stress shown, a little bit of few fibrinogens and that type of thing. But after then 20 minutes of swiping on the iPad and the iPhone, I then had asked for a post test, and all of my blood cells were all clumped together in rouleau formation. And the most remarkable thing was the lack.
Just dropped out a bit there, Julie.
Sorry. And the most remarkable thing was not just the rouleau formation in my blood, but the lack of white blood cells. The naturopath didn't really know very much about it. She's probably like you, Molly. She maybe heard about it, and she was so shocked to see that my white blood cells were gone. She said, "It looks like your immune system had been nuked."
Dropped out again, Julie. Sorry.
Anyway, so that was 20 minutes after 20 minutes exposure. So I recommend anyone who can do live blood analysis, do it on yourself and do a pre-test, and then do just exposure to an iPad or an iPhone, swiping on it for 20 minutes, and then do a post test and look at the difference. Take photos and take data.
Be very interesting to do some children who are in Wi-Fi all day at school, wouldn't it? Be interesting to get some studies.
Yes, if you could do them at the beginning of the day before they're exposed, but you'd have to make sure that they were not exposed during the night. You'd have to make sure that you cleaned up all the Wi-Fi at home and then gave them exposures. But there are many tests you could do. But yes, that's one. Live blood analysis, though, I don't think is recognised by the mainstream, though it is of course recognised by naturopaths.
Yeah, agree. Yeah.
So I won't go. I'll jump that one, and let's just go into 5G. Let's talk about. Shall we talk
just
about
gone
5G?
off again.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. You there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you said, you'd have to make sure the kids were free of electromagnetic frequencies during the night. So how do we do that? How do we keep ourselves safe and have some protection from these?
Okay, well, I'll jump over 5G and I'll go on to how to keep ourselves safe for personal safety. So, first of all, with your phone, okay? Everybody worries about the tower outside, but they don't realise that their phone is the greatest source of electromagnetic radiation. With your phone, you need to disable all of the signals on the phone. And people say, oh, I'll just turn it off. Well, that doesn't work, because when you turn your phone off, all you're doing is turning off the software. That's all those bright lights at the front of the phone that make all the fancy pictures and, send photos. In the back of the phone, if you turn your phone over, in the back are little pieces of metal, which are the antennas, and they keep sending and receiving even when your phone is off.
It's completely off.
Yes. They use low-level battery to continually track you. Now, so what you need to do to disable the antennas is two main things. And I've got them here. If you go into settings on your phone, everyone who's listening to this, if you've got a phone right now, if you pull it out and have a look and find settings, the first thing is to turn airplane mode on. Okay, and that's what you need to do when you go into an airplane, because you have to disable your phone on many flights still. So you turn it on as if you're going on to an airplane, and that will stop all of your your phone plan, your text messages and your incoming phone calls. Then you need to go into location services and turn that off. Location services is used to locate you wherever you go, and it talks to the GPS system and to the satellites, the local GPS towers. Now, to find it on the iPhone, you've got to scroll down from airplane mode. You scroll down about 8 things. I think it's under battery. There's something called privacy.
Yes,
You
yes.
find privacy, click on privacy.
Mm-hmm.
That will take you into location services and then press off. Now, you should leave that off all the time because that's wasting your battery power, if nothing else. You don't need to be located wherever you go. You don't need Google or somebody like that to be knowing that you've gone to the hairdressers or to the coffee shop or to visit your friend up the street. That's what that information is being, and it's also being sent by apps to locate you. It wastes your battery. The only time you need Google Maps is, location services is for Google Maps. And if you go into Google Maps and try and turn it on, and you've got location services off, Google Maps will say you need to turn location services off to use use this app. Do you want to do this? And you say yes, I do. So that fixes the problem. But then make sure you go and turn it off afterwards. So that should be off all the time.
Okay.
And in particular, that antenna actually, because it has to travel further to the GPS system, it actually transmits at 10 to 100 times stronger than the antenna that's being used for your phone messages. Gosh. And it's even worse when you're in a car, because when you're in a car or a bus or a train, you're in a partial Faraday cage because the metal's actually blocking it. And it's like you're in a mini microwave oven.
Yeah, microwave oven.
So when you're sending a message or receiving a message inside the car, your phone actually has to increase its power to get out. And so because of that, you're actually therefore creating more havoc on your body if you're using your phone inside the car. Really, we should actually have the antennas for Google Maps on the outside of the car. We should be able to connect the phone inside the car with the antenna transmitting from the outside of the car, so it's not actually needing to get outside. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But anyway, back to this. So this is what you need to do all the time is keep airplane mode off and airplane mode on, getting on the plane, and location services off. I don't want to be tracked. That's off. And then tell your friends and your family you're going to do this, but after breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, turn airplane mode off. Check your messages, send your messages, and then put airplane mode back on. Nice. So that way you get your life back.
Yes, instead of being pinged every few minutes, perhaps.
Yes, you do not have to be pinged every few minutes. And that way you don't have the phone checking in with the local tower. Do you have a message for me? Do you have a message for me? Pinging backwards and forwards every couple of minutes, which is going through your body and through the bodies of the children in the house with you and your neighbours as well and your pets. You can actually keep yourself. This is good phone hygiene.
Yeah, that's great information, Julie. Thank you.
Yes. And here we can actually see that you shouldn't use wired headsets either because they bring the EMRs directly into your brain and increase the risk of tumours. Instead, you can actually get air tubes, which are little headphones that go into your ears, but the last 10 centimetres is made of air. So it's using air pressure to send the signal. So you're not actually sending the signal into your brain. I also have a tip sheet which I can send you with a lot more information about how to keep yourself safe. Basically, everything needs to be wired. Everything at home needs to be wired. Everything at school needs to be wired. That's the way the world was before we went wireless. It was just because we didn't want dirty, messy wires on the floor. Well, you can do it cleanly. You can run it through conduit. You can run it under the skirting boards. You can run fibre optic cable through the earth. That's how schools should be connected and businesses. But as far as the homes go, don't think as a woman, oh, I want a tidy floor, because as I said before, the mess on the floor is much less than the mess in your body.
Yes. Yeah, great point. Okay. All right. If you could send that to me, perhaps we could put that up on the Health Australia Party
page
for people to look at. Is that all right?
Yeah, you're welcome to do that.
Thank
I
you.
just share it left, right and centre. And of course, it's changing all the time, but, you know, that's my latest updates. It's about cleaning up your dirty electricity in your home, about safe use of phones, and, yeah, safe use of devices. They're the main things. What people don't know is that solar is not safe. It's a very, very wicked problem that we have, because solar is good in terms of reducing energy, but the inverters in the solar systems in houses create cancer, and they create a lot of dirty electricity around the home, which is linked to things like multiple sclerosis, as well as just headaches and sleep problems.
Okay.
And so really what we need to be doing with solar, and it's also, they have smart meters tied to their coattails, and smart meters have created havoc with people's health. Perfectly healthy people in Victoria get a smart meter installed in their power box, and within 2 weeks, thousands of people have been affected. They have blood noses, can't sleep, dizziness, pain, and become hypersensitive to other things like phones as well, just because their meter box got changed to one that sends a signal to the power station using microwave radiation. And that's often connected now. When you get solar, they tell you have to have a smart meter, which isn't true, but they tell you have to. So smart meters are touted also as being green and clean because they monitor electricity. But I can tell you this because I work in data collection, and I also worked in a project looking at ways to reduce people's energy consumption about a couple of decades ago. Collecting data doesn't change people's behaviour. And so that's a big smoke screen in a way. What we need to change people's behaviour is help them by giving them things that are easy to use that reduce energy, like energy saving device, energy saving hot water system, energy saving nozzles for the shower. If you give people those, then they'll save energy as well as water. But if you just give them data on how they're using their electricity, very few people change looking at their own data. They don't even really understand it, unfortunately. But they will change if they see their neighbours conserving energy or water. That will affect their behaviour. Anyway, back to the point. The point is that solar is a wicked problem, and if pressure was put on institutes who are developing solar to do it cleanly and safely, it could be done. When you put limitations on engineers, they're great at coming up with wonderful creative solutions, and that's what we need. We need to say we want solar, but we don't want dirty electricity, and we don't want harmful inverters. Please try and work it out DC or some other way.
And that's possible.
Well, everything is possible with ingenuity, as engineers are. They're very ingenious. You give them funding, you give them research money to design, to come up with the designs, to problem solve, and they will.
Yeah. So a lot to be done, really, to make this technology safer to use, because I think, to be fair, we're so used to our mobile phones, we're so used to the iPads and this technology, and it is convenient. And I love my iPad, absolutely love it. I keep it on airplane mode, but I see I might have to change that location thing.
That's right.
But,
and in the tip sheet that I send you, you can actually even connect it via an Ethernet cable.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's what we need. We need to know how to do this safely, because the technology is not going to go away.
No.
And we don't necessarily want it to, although I think there's a few things with 5G that are a little bit questionable, perhaps.
Yes. So can I talk about 5G?
Yes, please.
So I'll just go back to 5G, because this is the new one. So 5G, as I said, uses those tiny little wavelengths, and they are really high frequency, and that's why 5G is wanted, because they want to be able to transmit more data faster.
Yes.
Now, why do they want it? They want it mostly for, at the moment, they're saying for driverless cars and for us to be able to download a movie in a second.
Very important, Julie.
Now, when you look, when you look at the priorities that we have on the planet right now, in terms of the really big issues that we're facing, being able to download a movie, having instant data is not our top priority. We're being hyped into believing that it's a top priority, but I personally don't believe it's a top priority.
Agree.
Okay, and moreover, we already know that wireless technologies use a substantial amount of the Earth's energy. And we know that we're approaching an energy crisis, and we're trying to get people to conserve energy in many, many other ways. Yet, the biggest consumer of the internet is YouTube use. And if you look at it, it's actually consuming about 5% greenhouse gases. Okay,
Gosh.
it's huge.
Yeah.
Wired technologies use much less power than wireless. Why? You think about it, because a wireless transmitter has to send the signal 360 degrees in all directions. It doesn't know where the device is. But a wired connection just sends it along the wire. It knows exactly where to send it. So it's not just more secure, it actually takes less power. And it's believed that within 5 years, that when we add 5G, we're actually going to increase the consumption of energy by 150 to 150%. So it's not even though it's being touted as being cleaner, it's not. 5G signals don't require as much power for each device, but there's going to be thousands more of them everywhere. And 4G and 3G isn't going away, that's staying there. 5G is being added to it. So how does 5G work? Well, to get all this crisscross connectivity across the world with everything connected, the Internet of Things, everything in your home, your coffee pot talking to your fridge, how do we do it? Well, the little 5G waves, as I said, don't travel very far. And if you had normal masts that go out in all directions, they'd interfere with one another. So what they're doing is, instead of sending them out like normal masts send out 3G and 4G, they're sending them out in beams. So the waves go up and down like this. And what's happening is, see all these little components here. They're all tiny little antennas, and each one of them is sending out a millimeter wave. And they're sending them out in sync. So they all go up together and they all go down together, and they all go up together and they all go down together. And that's how you get a whole lot of weak waves combining to create a strong wave. And then they're focused into a beam. And so this is called phased array, and this is called beam forming. They're focused into a beam. And the beam is going to go from a local small cell on a pole in your street to your house, or to the driverless car, or to the person walking down on their mobile phone. It'll be going zip, 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 zip in these beams. To get them to work, they're going to have to cut down trees, because trees stop them. People in neighbourhoods around the world are complaining about this. And there's going to have to be lots of them everywhere, because, as we said, they don't travel very far. This is an engineer's model of what the world will be like and what the beams will be like. What do you notice about this picture?
The one at the top?
Down in the bottom right.
Oh, the
this
bottom.
Is their model. What do you notice? Well, what I notice is there's not many people in it.
Yes.
And there's not many trees. See,
there's no trees. Yeah. Oh, yeah. A couple there. Yeah.
There's one per house. Everyone gets one tree. You can see that the thing is that engineers don't think about biology. We don't factor into their models. They see us as white space, except they do understand that our head will reduce the signal by 6 decibels. It gets in the way. And this is a problem. But you can see that when the beam is going between the tower and the car, it goes through that person. So that person might not be wanting to send or receive a signal, but it's actually going through their body. That phased array beam will be going through them. Gosh, and so this is how, that's right. And this will be on a pole outside somebody's home with their children sleeping inside, and it'll be beaming 24/7. Now, has this been tested? No. The effects of this? No. But you know, you have to do pre-market testing if you're going to roll out toothpaste. You have to know what the effects are on human health.
Yeah.
Well, this hasn't been pre-market testing, and at least there needs to be honesty about that. We don't know, even if they don't admit harm, which we're saying there is potential harm, and there's a lot of evidence for it. But even if they won't admit that, they have to say, we don't know if there's harm or not. It's up to you to decide if you want it. The problem is that people are feeling disempowered because how can they stop something on a tower outside their home? And city councils around the world are starting to become active and starting to stop using their own means to stop this rollout in their shires and in their suburbs. So what do we know in terms of the science? There is limited science. This is the problem. It hasn't been tested. But what do we know? There are some positive effects of very, very short-term exposures can actually suppress tumours by switching on, triggering the immune system. But there are other papers that show with long-term effects, there's an array of negative effects. Here we have changes in heart rate, damage to DNA and gene expression, effects on the nervous system, immune system, changes in bacterial growth and antibiotic resistance. This is an early Russian study from 1977, which has recently been declassified, showing very concerning effects. The Russians have actually been studying this for quite a long time because they're not capitalists. The effects of, on industry don't come into so much play over there. It doesn't stop them from being able to expose and publicise effects. So their standards, their exposure limits that they're allowed to expose their public to are much, much lower than ours, 1,000 times lower. So the Russian study, they showed, this is 5G, bunched and damaged nerves in the skin and surface layers, changes to protein and carbohydrate metabolism, disturbance of the immune and blood systems. This author concluded high biological activity and an unfavourable influence on the organism. Now, Western science has shown permanent skin tissue damage, because what happens is the millimetre waves, you can imagine, they're like a machine gun going on the same little tiny area of skin over and over. Now, one of those little blasts isn't going to heat the skin, but when they're repeated over and over, they're actually causing these intense heating spots, which cause permanent skin tissue damage. Okay, even the conservative scientists, some have recognised this. And this is going to happen this is predicted to exceed the limits, the amount of heating, because our exposure limits only look at heating. They don't look at all the effects on cells and biology and mitochondria. They don't consider any of that. Our safety limits that we live under in Australia only consider that heating is of concern, nothing else. But even that limit, which is so weak, will be exceeded by these intense hotspots. We also, there's also some suggestion that sweat glands of the skin, they act like mini antennas, which will, if you know about what an antenna does, it actually amplifies an effect and amplifies a signal. And when the 5G waves, which will be pulsed, when they enter the body, because when they enter the biological tissue, they're likely to create these secondary waves called beryllium precursors. This is just a mathematical model, but these waves will penetrate much deeper into the body, potentially unraveling proteins and causing intense heating. So even ARPANSA, our advisory organisation that says that we should use this exposure standard, which is so weak and doesn't protect us from many effects, even they say the main areas of concern are skin and eyes and protein unravelling. But when asked publicly, they don't speak about that.
It's interesting, isn't it? Julie, can we just go back to that first point that you made? Some positive effects, such as tumour suppression, with short 30-minute exposures. Now, my understanding, 5G is 24/7 all the time. It's on all the time.
That's right.
You wouldn't ever have a 30-minute exposure, would you?
No, no. This is, see, because the Russians have been experimenting with this for a long time, they've actually found ways to use millimeter waves therapeutically just for very short-term exposures. Just like now, you know, ultraviolet light is being used for skin conditions in very, very short exposures, or even ionizing radiation with very, very short exposures. It's given to people before they go for radiotherapy, you know, for cancer treatment, because it does actually trigger an immune response to actually create like a healthy response. But that's only because, you know, when the immune system is under stress, or the body systems are under stress, of course they trigger on all of their repair mechanisms, you know, that all switches on in the short term. And that's, you know, that's the inflammatory response. That's why we get the inflammatory response. It's actually a healing response in the short term. But if it then goes on and on and on and on, it turns into a long-term stress, or creating oxidative stress, which leads to DNA damage and cancer. So that's probably the same thing that's going, you know, that will be happening here.
Yes. Interesting.
So that's 5G, and there's effects on pollinators, on bees and insects. That are all listed here. This is not 5G. This is actually what's already known about 3G and 4G. But then, as we can see, above 6G, which is when we're going to the 5G, high 5G frequencies. Okay, this paper here showed that the insects would absorb more of the power because, as we said before, it's the wavelength of their body. So that's where they will maximally absorb those wavelengths. And we don't know the effect, but we already know from the existing ones that we're getting decline in colony strength and egg laying rate. That there's no honey or pollen. There's reduced motor activity, and their communication signals are being affected. The other environmental effects that I'm quite concerned about are water and oxygen, because both water and oxygen absorb, because of their molecular structure and size, they maximally absorb 5G, high 5G frequency wavelengths. Here's the oxygen. Oxygen actually absorbs, will actually maximally absorb 60 gigahertz, which is being used for point-to-point radiation, but it's also now being proposed for lots of short-distance radiation between devices in the future. And also water absorbs 5G frequencies. Now, engineers see this as a problem because they say, oh, when it rains, you know, the signal fades because the rain is absorbing the signal, and so we have to turn up the strength. But they're not actually thinking about what's actually happening to the molecule when it's absorbing the radiation. Okay, because when the molecule is absorbing that radiation, it's actually changing the molecule at the quantum level. So these high frequency 5G waves that are coming are going to be changing the molecular structure of water and oxygen. This is a real concern.
It certainly is. I mean, it's insane.
No, and it hasn't been tested. They haven't thought about it. They just see it as a nuisance. You know, they haven't actually looked at, well, what's the effect of this on, you know, the electron transport chain, on the uptake of oxygen in cells, the effect on trees, the effect on rain, the effect on, you know, as we said before, we're made up of, you know, 50% of our makeup is water or more. What's the effect of this? And if we change the molecular structure of oxygen, will we be breathing oxygen? What will we be breathing? You know, what will water be if it's had its rotational energy affected? these things haven't been tested.
Oh,
There's a blinkered view on this.
oh, I don't understand. I just don't get how they cannot be screaming out for tests to see what happens. Well, I guess I do understand it because a lot of dollars involved here, I think.
Yes. So right up to the top of the WHO, the World Health Organization has an organization, has a group in it called that looks at the effects of non-ionizing radiation on health. It's called the WHO EMF project. And but a lot of the people who are in the WHO EMF project are actually also in ICNIRP, which is the international body that sets this exposure limit that Australia uses. But they have such close ties with industry. So those same people are now that are in this WHO EMF project, and they're the ones that are supposed to be looking at the health effects. And what they do is they keep the discussion on cancer. They don't look at all of these other effects that I've been talking about. They keep the debate on cancer. And even that has been shown. There's been, in the last couple of years, papers have come out showing serious and statistically significant results with rats showing cancer, especially rare aggressive cancers. They look at worker exposures, but they don't really look at people being exposed 24/7 in their home. And they only, as I said before, their standard only considers heating. They don't consider biological effects. So how can it actually be of any use to us, of any purpose? Okay. And they only look at power levels, whereas we know from the papers that there are so many more things going on with the signals, that there's frequency, pulse rates, modulation. That's how much it's being, how much up and down is going on the carrier wave. There's a carrier wave, and then there's a wave on top, which is the signal that's being sent, and that's the modulation. All of these things have different biological effects, and we know that pulsing is more bioactive. It doesn't matter if you're measuring the power levels, you can get at the same power level, you can get different effects depending on the shape of the wave. And that's not surprising when you think that the brain is actually set up to process frequency. You know, light is frequency, sound is frequency. Our brain is set up to recognize different frequency means different things to our brain. Same to our cells. We are frequency and energy receptors. So if you change the shape, our body recognizes it as something different. But engineers don't understand that. They only look at power. And that's why they don't understand the biological effects. So the risks are clear. And to claim that the current limits are keeping us safe is incorrect. Actually, under the current limits, we are showing lots of different harmful effects. Our public regulator of these signals is the Australian Communications Media Authority, ACMA. In their act, this is their duty to care for the health and safety protection to persons who operate, work with, or use wireless equipment via the establishment of standards. A standard is actually usually a 30-page plus document that says when and where and how and why and which people can actually do something with some technology or some chemical or some object. But we don't have standards. What they call standards, they're actually not standards. A standard has not been created. They're just guidelines, and they come from ICNIRP, and that's what Australia uses. So instead of setting this standard and sticking to their mandate under the Act to worry about our health and safety, this is what they've said, that if we worried about the precautionary principle, you know, about being careful in the face of all these harmful risks, this would place a regulatory burden on industry which would require strong justification. And the ACMA, which of course regulates all the frequencies that industry uses, does not discern this justification. So the way that we see it is it's the foxes guarding the hen house.
Yes.
So cluck, cluck, cluck.
Chirp, chirp. It's quite scary, actually, isn't it, for the future of mankind, basically, and planet Earth and every living creature or insect.
Yes.
It's very scary when you really break it down and start to look at it, which people aren't doing. The general public have no inkling that anything is other than as it should be, and is all is well.
That's right. Though there are groups, you know, that we've heard of, groups starting up all over Australia, as well as city councils. We're being asked by city councils to talk to them, to explain to them these harmful effects, because they're at the buffer zone between the rollout of 5G and the people that they're responsible for to protect. And city councillors, you know, are mostly honest, hardworking people who are trying to look after their constituents, and they need to know what's going on. And they can't believe that the authorities aren't protecting us either. It comes as a shock to everyone. But unfortunately, that is what's going on. In particular in schools, it's being rolled out. It's been shown to cause harm, and no one's monitoring it. And no one's even telling the children and parents and teachers and principals that this is potentially harmful and you need to do things to reduce your exposure. No one's being told.
So there's some work to be done.
There is. There is. I need to let you know, if you don't believe any of the science, believe the insurance industry. They recognise the risk. Lloyd's of London will not insure, and they've advised insurance companies around the world, they will not insure against harm done by radio frequency, microwave radio frequencies. They've done their own studies and they recognise the risks, and they don't want to lose the money that they would lose if they insured people for loss or damage from harm from mobile phones or iPads. The other thing is, if you go into the small print of the iPad, you'll actually see that it tells you to keep it 0.5 metre away from your body, and to keep the antenna facing away from your body. Most people don't know that. They don't go in and read it, and they don't know that. So children are keeping it on their laps all the time, and most people are. They don't realise they're actually sending the microwave radiation straight into their stomach and their ovaries and their lungs.
Well, I didn't know that. 0.5 metre, that's like an arm's length, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't make the iPad so appealing to do that.
Exactly.
But you can connect it via an Ethernet cable if you have a look at my tip sheet.
Yep.
All of the advisors to governments around the world all seem to be somehow compromised with ties to industries, both research centres and public protection authorities. They all seem to be repeating the same no conclusive evidence of harm statements in public. They choose hand-picked papers, and when we talk about any harmful effects, they just water down the results. They use pseudoscience, it seems, to cover up and water down effects because it's not in their best interests to actually admit to harm. Moreover, many of them, ICNIRP, the WHO EMF project and ARPANSA, they don't have people with medical expertise in those bodies. They're physicists and engineers. They might have people who have a qualification in medicine, but not in RF medicine. You know, they're in some other area of medicine that hasn't got to do with radio frequency. They do actually not have the biophysicists that they need. And the independent biophysicists that are trying to get this word out are actually ignored, and they don't get airspace. There's a lot of media muscle behind these voices. And also what we've done is we've actually drawn a diagram of how all these bodies form what we call the club. This is in our 5G submission to the this is our submission to the 5G parliamentary inquiry. You can see, for example, how Telstra is connected to the ATMA, which is the peak body for mobile telecommunications industry. They're related to the ACMA. Our Australian Centre for Research has links with them and with industry. And the chairperson, the ex-chief investigator of our research body is now the chairperson of ICNIRP, which is the international body that sets the standard, that has links with telecommunications industry. The government regulators like ARPANSA look to ICNIRP. They get they take their guidance from ICNIRP and from the scientists who are linked to ICNIRP and to industry, and they don't do their own independent research. Even though they say they're monitoring it, they haven't even had the equipment to monitor it, and I don't believe they have the equipment yet to monitor 5G. The World Health Organization, as I said before, the people in that project come from ICNIRP. And look here, we have the Telstra 5G rollout strategist working for Telstra is also the person who is the chairman of the Radiofrequency Safety Program for our peak body for telecommunications. And the same person is also the commissioner of the International Electrochemical Commission, which is supposed to be setting the standards, right? The same person. So when he comes out in public and says, oh, Telstra is following the international standards, what we're not told is he's the chairperson of the commission that's actually setting those standards.
Oh, it's disgraceful. It's nothing short of disgraceful. It's so incestuous.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
It's all smoke and mirrors. And because the World Health Organization has such high esteem, people don't understand that it's so compromised. This part of the World Health Organization is compromised anyway, the EMF project. And who's left? Governments are left looking to the WHO, looking to ARPANSA in Australia, the FCC in the US, and underneath them are the families and children of Australia who are being affected by all of this going on, determining what we are being exposed to in our offices, what children are being exposed to at school, and now what's being rolled out in our streets. So I recommend people look at this. I've got this link here, How the Wireless Industry Made Us Believe That Mobile Phones Are Safe. It's an article in an independent online journal, newspaper. It's an online newspaper, The Nation. Anyway, George Carlo, he was an industry favourable scientist. He was known to be kind to industry in many other fields. So because of that, the wireless industry commissioned him in 1995. They gave him $26 million to do a study called the Wireless Technology Research Project, looking into are there harmful effects of wireless. They expected, of course, that he would be very kind to them. But lo and behold, George Carlo, who'd been very conservative and in many other fields hadn't been willing to say there were effects, he found effects. And he sent a letter to his superiors saying there's a risk of rare tumours on the outside of the brain. It's more than doubled in mobile phone users. Okay, there's a correlation between brain tumours on the right side of the head and mobile phone use of the head. And there's clear evidence for functional genetic damage. You need to let people know. But instead, they didn't listen to him. Of course, he lost his job. He wanted them just to allow people to make an informed choice, but he didn't. Instead, Motorola decided to, in quotes, war game the science. You can actually look up, there's a link of proof of a memo where Motorola actually say that explicitly, we will war game the science. What that means is we will present science to the world, just like tobacco science did, to cover up the truth, to water down results, and to sow seeds of doubt. And that's been going on now for about 50 years. And that's why people are so confused.
It's so disappointing, Julie, that human beings would do this. To what end? Some dollars and a bit of power, I guess. I don't know. It's very disappointing.
It's extremely disappointing. And it's a human rights issue, you know, that you actually, people need to know. They need to know that there's a risk. They need to be taught how to keep themselves safe. And that it's a poison, just like other poisons. But other poisons, at least you get a choice to use it. But here, you know,
Yes.
if I blow a cigarette and smoke in your face, I'm assaulting you, you know, and I can be charged. But we have towers. If you can visualize it, the towers, it's like they're billowing out cigarette smoke from the towers, from every mobile phone. It's putting out toxic. If you imagine it putting out toxic fumes day and night, we're surrounded by it. People don't have the information, and
Yes.
they don't have a choice because everybody's passively smoking. And when it goes on a pole outside your house, you won't have a choice. So then we've talked about personal safety, but wide national safety, this is what we need. We're talking about a policy for a political party and for government agencies. We need wide connections, we need reduced exposure, and we need an independent body to create and manage the standards, not our panzer.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
anyone who's compromised by industry. And the people have to be independent, and they have to have the required medical expertise to make informed decisions and to advise government in an informed way. This is how safety management has happened with ionising radiation now for decades. Australia's done it before with ionising radiation. We decided it was too dangerous, even though it would give us unlimited power. We didn't want it. And we can do the same with non-ionising radiation. We can decide we're going to reduce it and we're going to wire everything. At the same time, we need to reduce the industry influences, and we need to be funding proper research looking into the effects so that we know how to go forward into the future.
Yes, yeah, quite agree, yes.
So there you go. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for that talk, for giving me this time to talk. And I'm sorry if I've put everybody to sleep.
No, it's been quite fascinating. I'm really grateful, Julie. Thank you so much.
I'll stop the share now, and if anybody has any questions, I can answer them. Or has everybody left and gone to sleep?
I can't see the feed, the Facebook feed, so I don't know if questions are coming or not. I'm sorry.
That's okay, Molly.
So yeah, Julie, look, thank you. You're an amazing source of information, and I guess I'm disappointed in our government bodies and the authorities. I'm disappointed in humanity for certain people and industries being so focused, I guess, on the dollar, because you always follow the money, don't you? And I guess at the end of the day, that's where it comes to. We love the technology, but we do need to make it safe and for people to be aware of the dangers. Like I'm at the shops, I look at the amount of people who have a phone in their pants pocket, or not so many in their bras these days, but certainly in the pant pocket, and little kids in prams, little toddlers with the iPhone on their little bellies just looking at it.
Yes.
And it's disappointing that we live in a society that isn't kind to humankind. They're not kind to people, not so caring for each other, more for, I don't know, what can they get out of it, or, I don't know, disappointing. I'm disappointed.
Yes, I'm sorry to be the bringer of bad news, but if I can say this, is that everybody to some extent still has a choice. Even though industry might be doing this, each person still has free will about what they do in their own home. You know, it's been shown, for example, that children are really angry and feel betrayed by the amount of time that their mothers spend on the mobile phone in their presence. You know, families can do things like have a basket at the door where all devices get disabled, like I've shown you to do, and you leave them at the door when you come inside, and then you have family face-to-face time. The children would love this. It's not, you know, we are their role models in terms of how to use technology.
Yes.
And I think the love affair with technology is starting to wind down. You know, we're not so bedazzled. They're starting to realise in the schools, for example, that it's not making kids smarter. And in fact, when you look at the latest Gonski report that's just come out, children are actually less able to concentrate. Principals and teachers are seeing this, but they're also having more emotional and behavioural problems, and less empathy. 80% of them are noticing less empathy. When you say about that inability to care, you know what I mean? There's kind of this detachment from reality that's happening. And we need to weigh up, you know, like the thing about being grown up in the world is that the world is not simple. You know, we have things on a balanced scale. On one hand, we have health, planetary health, human health, mental, social, emotional health. And on the other side of the scale, we have progress and making money. Okay. Now you can actually bring some money over with health and say you can still make money and be healthy, you know. But where's the tipping point? And at the moment, the side of the scale that's weighing much more heavily is the love of money and the love of power and the love of control. People still have, at the end of the day, they still have their free will and they still have a choice to inform themselves and to look after themselves. And that's my hope, that by bringing this message that I'll help promote that in people and trust that they can, that the ordinary everyday people still care enough, especially about their children, that they will actually look into this.
Wise words. Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a long talk, but incredibly informative, and I'm very grateful for your time because I know how very busy you are. So thank you very much, Julie.
You're welcome, Molly. Please just break it up and show it to whoever you want to.
Okay,
and all the best in your endeavours with the party. And I really hope that it can go forward to help, you know, promulgate health in Australia.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we're certainly working on that, and the more members we have, the more power we have, I guess, to do things and to have a voice. So, yes.
Thanks very much, Molly. Good night then to you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good night.